Joe, we continue on our deep dives. Speaking of northern teams, we go up to a state that has a very passionate fan base. Madisonville, by the way, Madison is actually a really good place to go and watch some football games. But year two under a new head coach. He's not a new head coach. Luke Fickell's been there for a year, but year two under Luke Fickell. Let's get into Wisconsin. What do you see with the Badgers going into year two here?
Biggest thing that stands out to me, Blake, is how experienced, how tough, how physical that they are on both lines of scrimmage. I'm talking about their offensive line and their front seven on defense. They're deep at linebacker. They've got a lot of really good defensive linemen. John Pius transfers in from William & Mary, who is a very underrated athlete. He is very, very explosive. I'm a big fan of James Thompson Jr., who is one of their defensive tackles. He is going to be a top 100 NFL draft pick in 2025. And then on their offensive line, Jack Nelson is one player that I have been really excited about. I was watching him last night. He does some really tremendous stuff at that left tackle spot. And at right tackle, they've got a 6'8" guy. So you got 6'7" Jack Nelson at right tackle. You've got 6'8", 320-pound Riley Mahlman. They got some dudes along their lines of scrimmage. And that to me is enough for you to be, not to win the conference. I don't think they're there. But to be stout along both lines of scrimmage is hard to have. And Wisconsin has consistently recruited well at both of these positions. I think that is going to make them dangerous in the Big Ten in 2024.
So I look at Wisconsin, okay, and I say to myself, a couple of things. I agree with you. Getting Pius, does Tackett Curtis, get into that other inside linebacker spot? Yeah. I think he's going to be in a battle there. The thing for me is, Joe, is that they're pretty much returning everybody. I think that is got to be the biggest thing. Look, you look at both lines of scrimmage. You look at their defense. Joe, how does Luke Fickell do, and who has been known to be a pretty good developer, at least as his time as a head coach? What have we seen? He's been a really good developer. His staffs have been really good at developing. I think that there's something to be said about developing guys that are coming back for another year. They really get affected by the portal. They bring in a guy like Jake Renfro, who they were able to get back to come back yet again. That offensive line is a little interesting because I do think that they have a lot of interesting pieces. Look, when I watched them last year, did a lot of breakdown for the bowl game, versus LSU, I thought that they had a lot of tackle issues. Okay. And I think that played out a little bit in reference to, look, LSU defensively wasn't that good along the defensive line, and they were able to get pressure with guys that they did not get pressure with a lot. Okay. But they kind of mixed some things up. So I'm going to wait and see along their offensive line. But when you had the two worst dudes on a team like LSU who has that bad defensively get that much pressure, for example, Mekhi Wingo coming off an injury, and then you have Mason Smith getting pressure at the guard position. Then you got Savion Jones and others getting pressure. I question.
You're talking about the guard spots. You're not talking about
no. I knew that was going to happen. Stay with me. But then when I went to Savion Jones, when I saw Braden Swinson starting getting pressure, two guys, I would expect it from the interior guys in Smith and Wingo. Both of those guys got drafted. Jordan Jefferson a lot. What I didn't expect is for LSU, as an example, at the end of last year to get as much pressure as they did on the outside, right? And that was the big thing I thought going into that game was, could you get more pressure than you've been able to on an offensive line that you're more athletic than? The only thing was they pushed LSU around in the running game. I thought maybe a different style of play and reference. That's why I'm not too off on them. Maybe a different style of play when, look, Joe, they're dominating in one area and then they got out-athleted, I felt, in some others. But I think that they're hard-nosed. I think they're tough. And returning everybody's got to be a big thing. But obviously the biggest question mark is what they're going to do at quarterback with Van Dyke. And I know that we're about to get in this conversation, so I'll just stop and let you go on this. But I do think they have a lot of solid, experienced pieces. I just don't know how athletic they are, though, which kind of I think Joe, kind of worries me a little bit. You know, like if I'm them, like where are they supposed to be? What are you expecting Wisconsin to be going into next year? Do I think they got a lot of really good pieces? Yes. Do I think they're athletic enough to be where they've been in the past? I don't know about that.
So to kind of clarify here, where they lack athleticism is at receiver. I wouldn't necessarily say that they lack athleticism in other spots. I mean, Jack Nelson's a very good athlete. He's going to test really well at the NFL Combine. They've got players on talking about James Thompson. He's a pretty good athlete for a defensive lineman. Their linebackers can move pretty well. I'm not saying that they're freaks. They're not in the top category of college football players, but they've got guys that can move and their secondary is fine. I think to talk about Van Dyke, one thing that makes me feel better about Van Dyke coming into this situation is that Ches Malusi's coming back. He played 4 games last year before he suffered an injury. I forget exactly what it was, but he was averaging 6 yards a clip and 76 yards per game in that stretch. I think his production could seriously go up as if he is fully healthy for the entire year. He is an underrated back in the college football landscape for what we saw in that very small sample size. My pause with Wisconsin absolutely does come with Tyler Van Dyke. I think less will be on his shoulders coming into this situation because they're going to rely on the run game and the way that we saw that their offense operate. They didn't necessarily need Tanner Mordecai to throw the ball 35 times a game. Where Tyler Van Dyke found himself getting into trouble was when they were throwing it a lot and he was forcing throws and he was forcing decisions and he wasn't thinking things through. His eyes deceived him. Watching him play, Blake, almost feels like you're watching a pitcher who's got the yips. You know, a guy who, he can do it.
He's a college version of Sam Darnold, dude. He's seeing ghosts.
Honestly. I have been critical of him, and I think that there are spurts where you watch him and you see the potential of him to be a good college quarterback. I still don't think he's much of a pro prospect. He can be accurately inconsistent, but what kills him is this weird, indecisive decision-making that kills him, that leads to picks, leads to just stupid, dumbass plays. I agree that to what you brought up in the open, there's a possibility that Van Dyke in a new situation is a little bit cleaned up. A new setting could be what could help in a new conference could be what helps his confidence. But again, it feels like a guy who's got the yips and just doesn't know how to get out of the rut that he's currently in.
Look, they're replacing Braylon Allen. I think it's a big thing to replace. Tanner Mordecai isn't there, and which a lot of people didn't realize Mordecai ran a lot last year, got sacked a lot last year too. Here's the thing for me with Van Dyke. I don't – what's interesting is I think he goes to a better offensive coordinator, and I think that hurts me to say that. I love Shannon Dawson. Love him. I think he goes to a better place, though. I think he goes to an overall better staff, right? Like I think that he goes to a place where we've seen Fickell, okay, legitimately develop dudes beyond their talent. When you've seen Cristobal have an unreal elite talent in Justin Herbert, he mismanaged him, right? Like I think that we all can agree to some extent that Cristobal at this exact moment, when you talk about number 10 that's in San Diego or LA now, but number 10 that's in LA, okay, with the Chargers, and even Van Dyke, I think that I think his quarterbacks have been mismanaged to some extent. Now,
okay.
With that being said, I don't know if I have no idea what to expect from Tyler Van Dyke. Zero.
That's the only way to answer it. That's the only way to answer it.
Can I give him the benefit of the doubt that Cristobal, Joe, I mean, Bo Nix as a freshman went in and beat an Oregon team that should have been a playoff team. I mean, they're legitimately making Justin Herbert run the football when Auburn could not stop them through the air. And like there have been times where we can legitimately look at Cristobal, even last year, not kneeling the ball, where he has made crucial errors in big time moments, right? How much did that go on to Van Dyke? But Tyler Van Dyke is still out there on the field making those horrible decisions. And I don't put
a lot of that on the
I
I
don't
put that
either.
mostly on Van Dyke. I put less of that on Cristobal.
I don't either. But I look at Van Dyke, though, and say, I do think that he's got some tools. There are some things that I like with him. I think that he can, when he's hot and he's in rhythm, the Texas A&M game happens. Right? And Joe, for what it's worth, Texas A&M has not been bad defensively the last 3 years. Secondary, okay. I mean, they still have like 6 dudes drafted the last 2 years. That's fine. When he's in rhythm, though, they legitimately, like, you see what he can be. But I have no clue. I legitimately have no clue what I'm to expect from him. I don't know how much they're going to ask for him to do, though, and I do wonder if he's a bridge player. I wonder.
Oh, no, he is a bridge. He is absolutely a bridge player. I mean, he's
right.
This is his last year of eligibility.
Well, and you bring in your guys, you get it to develop them. Does he start? I mean, you don't go to that place and not start, I don't think. But everybody around him needs to be better. And I do think that, look, there's something to be said that I do think that he goes into a better culture than what maybe he was in last year, potentially. So we'll see. And look, Miami's issues last year weren't all on Tyler Van Dyke either. Right? Like, Joe, we're talking about them being 7-0 going midway through the season, okay? And they decide not to kneel the ball, and everything after Georgia Tech goes trickling downhill, right? Like, that team should have been undefeated going in to, what was it, the Florida State week, or maybe I'm mistaken there, but I forget the big game they had after Georgia Tech. Maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe it was Clemson. I forget. But look, they blamed everything on Van Dyke. And it's funny that this time last year when we said the same exact thing, you more than me, when we talked about Tyler Van Dyke last year, Miami fans started hating on you. And then at the end, they wanted him to be done with. They wanted him out. And so, Look, I don't want to come in here and bash on the kid. I do see tools. I do see ability. I just think that, Joe, if his decision-making got better, I don't know if he couldn't be serviceable. Now, is he going to be an all Big Ten guy? No. Is he going to lead you to a playoff? No. Joe, can he throw you 20 to 22 touchdowns and maybe mitigate some interceptions and maybe be a quarterback and do some things and upset a team? Maybe. But let me ask you this question. Their schedule, what do you see their record potentially being this year?
So, as I like to do with these, pinpoint the difficult games on the schedule. They play Alabama at home. They go to USC. They have Penn State at home. They go to Iowa. They play Oregon at home, and then they go to Nebraska. So they don't actually have a very favorable draw. Like they don't have to play Michigan or Ohio State, which is to their benefit, but they're catching a lot of these good mid-level Big Ten teams, which I think is going to make things difficult for them. And I'm referring to the fact that they have to play Iowa at Iowa. They have to go at Nebraska. USC is in that upper category, and that could be a difficult trip. And their few non-con game that they have is against Bama. That's a bit of a, obviously was done intentionally, but that's a bit of a tough way to open out the year. I admittedly don't see better than 8-4. I just don't. But 8-4 is not a bad season in the new version of the Big Ten. If things go really freaking well, could you pull out a 9-3? But that's assuming that Tyler Van Dyke has he plays like he did in the Texas A&M game for most of the season. That's what you would need to get 9-3. I do see this being a team, though, with the mistakes that Van Dyke has consistently made throughout his career, that they're going to probably lay an egg in a game that they're not supposed to. You know, they could probably completely shit the bed against Iowa or completely shit the bed against Nebraska. That's what I'm kind of betting on, because this team's still being built. This isn't going to be an overnight thing with Wisconsin, as there's now far more competition than there's ever been.
The stretch that they have from October the 12th until, I'm just going to say, the end of the season. Okay, now hear me out here. Rutgers, look, man, you can laugh
Go
all
Knights.
I mean, you can laugh all you want to. That's not a win anymore in that conference. Joe, I'm going to say something you're going to hate. Northwestern actually wasn't as bad as everybody thought that they were going to be last year.
Oh, I don't hate that. That's another wouldn't call them a trap game, but that's also not an easy game.
It's just not an easy game. By the way, you're going to Evanston, right? Like you got to go to Illinois, which if you remember last year in the mid of October, remember last year or 2 years ago, it was 2 years ago. Remember when Ohio State went there and there was 30-mile-an-hour winds?
Which, by the way, this year where they're playing in the temporary field, it's like right on the water.
Right.
You're not going to be able to throw the ball in that stadium. Like
So
you're going to have a lot of trouble.
because they're going to be able to practice in it. Penn State, Iowa, Oregon, Nebraska, Minnesota. Joe, I can make a case that they could lose all of those games. I can make a case that they can win 4 of those games. I legitimately think that they can lose to Minnesota. I think they could lose to Nebraska because they're going to Lincoln. They're going to lose to Oregon. I can see where they lose to Iowa. I can see where they lose to Penn State, Northwestern, and Rutgers. Oh, by the way, you think week 1 in Camp Randall that Kalen DeBoer is not going to want to make a statement and run it up on you a little bit?
Well, so this is why I'm on this. I'm at this spot where I see them. They're one of the few teams that we're talking about here that I think has a wider range of outcomes that could happen. Luke Fickell could really, really right the ship and put Wisconsin on the trajectory that they could have for long-term success, which is being that punch you in the mouth type of a team that goes 9-3 every single year. That is what you should be striving for. Getting more than that's going to be really
they're not going
hard.
9-3 with this.
Wait,
with this schedule.
I'm not saying that with this schedule. I'm saying in the long-term future. Or this year could be really messy and up and down because of Van Dyke and some inconsistencies at quarterback and, the lack of big play receivers that you don't really have. There's one guy that I really liked with Will Pauling who was productive last year, but a lot of question marks. This is not exactly a
Pauling went off on LSU. I'll tell you this now.
Yeah.
I will tell you this now. As much as we're saying this, okay, let me tell you this. If they do find a pulse offensively, defensively, they're going to be all right. The only thing, like you said, though, Van Dyke scares the shit out of me, so I back off of it, right?
Yeah.
But, dude, from a guy who the last game that a team that I cover for full time, okay, dude, offensively, schematically, I mean, look, I'll just tell you this. There were two games that LSU, per the coaching staff, told me that they thought that they were out-schemed. Okay? Alabama, okay, and Wisconsin. Those were the 2 games that I know from people on that staff that they said that they got out-schemed and out-coached. Now, they beat Wisconsin off of pure talent, in my opinion. But the thing is, though, Joe, if Van Dyke is just more, just a little bit above average. I don't know if they don't go 9-3. I'm gonna make a bold statement. I think they go 9-3. I think they take a step. Mainly due to
Wisconsin. You just said that they're not going to go 9-3. What?
I changed my mind. I changed my mind on the top of a hat.
You stink. I hate doing the show with you sometimes when you do shit like that.
They're going to beat Alabama in week 1.
You just cut me off and said, Joe, they're not going 9-3. And then you sat here and talked yourself into it and then went, Joe, they're going to go 9-3.
All right, I'll be realistic. I think that they can go. I think that they're
8-4. 8-4 is a good prediction.
Their outright ceiling could be 9-3.
Yes.
Their outright ceiling could be 9-3. But I got to be honest with you, man. I don't know if they can't beat Penn State. Because if you have a team that defensively can stop them, and you know what the Penn State versus Wisconsin game is? Whose quarterback is less ass?
Well, so this is why it goes in line with everything that I'm talking about here. Is that they could be
probably right.
They could be a team that beats Penn State at home, but then goes on to lose to Rutgers, like you talked about. There's a lot of potential to this being a pendulum roller coaster season.
And I'm going to tell you something, man. I don't know in the beginning of the season. Stay with me here. Name somebody that has a more brutal week 1, week 2 than Wisconsin. Because a team that we didn't mention, Because imagine getting beaten up by Alabama in week 1, then having to fly to LA and having to legitimately stop Lincoln. Like, you get to a place where, Joe, this is a tough schedule. This is tough.
My whole point. I think that, to reiterate what I'm saying, they're good enough now, and bringing back the veteran players and being strong at important positions will set them up to upset someone this year.
Dude.
They will upset somebody,
Right.
but they're also going to have a dumb loss because of some of the weaknesses that we have laid out here.
Pause. Okay. If they upset Alabama in week 1,
it's not Alabama. It's not Alabama. They're not going to upset Alabama. They're not. That is not going to happen. And watch that one get clipped, and that one's going to circulate if they do upset Alabama. But the upsets I would see would be USC, Penn State, or Oregon. I think that those are all viable, capable games for them to pull out. And I don't know how much of an upset USC would be, admittedly, but
I think it would be an upset. Joe, Lincoln Riley and USC is supposed to beat Wisconsin at home.
I know. I'm just antagonizing like I usually do.
Yeah, you do. All right.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.